Really good show.
Yeah, good show. Good
Yep.
one.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. Good conversation.
Yeah, and that's what we need more of.
Ladies and gentlemen, they said that it couldn't happen, and it has happened. We've gotten to episode 5 of the new Athletic Supporters. How exciting this is!
Woohoo!
It's episode 5 for those of you who've been listening all along, but it's episode 1 for those of you that are watching for the very first time. Here we are in true living color. And you might be wondering why Kim isn't with us. Well, he is on the mound tonight.
Oh.
As they say.
He's pitching the big one.
Oh boy.
Say no more.
So tonight we're going to try something new, and hopefully this is going to be great for everybody that's paying attention to what we're doing. And that is, we're going to start a series where we are going to discuss a subject, a common subject among all sports. We'll do a little bit about what's been happening in the world of sports, but we're really going to concentrate on a subject that hopefully everybody can sink their teeth into and maybe even have their own take on it that they want to share with us on the social networks when we're sharing this podcast. But before we get into the subject, I want to talk about the subject, which is the Leafs. Once again, as is the rites of spring, being sprung from the playoffs.
Oh.
So look, rather than ask you guys who watch hockey on a regular basis for your take, I want to start with my take. As someone who has watched less than 45 minutes of hockey this year, this is what I noticed watching the Leafs for all of 30 minutes over the course of 7 games.
Okay.
They might be skilled, as Tim, you have said, and I actually do want to ask the question, when you say skilled, what does that mean? But what they don't have is balls. They don't get into the corners with veracity. They don't. It seemed like every time I turned on the TV, either the Leafs scored, which was wonderful, or they were chasing one of the Tampa Bay players down the side of the ice, and the Tampa player was always beating them to the puck and always getting in on the net and always either scoring or having a really great scoring opportunity. And it just made me think back in the olden days, back in this 70s and early 80s when I did watch hockey, and I really thought about the Broad Street Bullies and how they really had they had an image or a narrative of the team that was fearful. And the same thing over the course of the last few years where Toronto was trying to get over the hump with the Boston Bruins, it was the Boston Bruisers. They were always more physical than the Toronto Maple Leafs. And from what I saw, that's the thing that's really seemed to be missing on the Leafs is muscle.
Can I ask, Steve, did you watch 30 minutes in a stretch, or did you watch loads of little bits that added up to about 30 minutes?
Loads of little bits.
Okay. All right.
So go ahead, guys. Give her.
Tim, you want to start?
Sure. I can start if you like. It's an interesting take, Steve, actually, because I think you're right, particularly having watched hockey back in the day, as it were. I think that fewer teams play like that today than used to. I think that everybody had to play like that. And I certainly think your observations about how the Leafs got beaten by Boston is certainly along that angle. But picking up on your question about skill, I think the thing about the Leafs is that they are, and Tampa not dissimilar really, there are a few teams like this where skill and speed and passing and that kind of individual skill and the way the team is organized is how they play their hockey. Now, does that mean that that's not a successful way to play hockey because they have not got through the first round for 600 years? Yeah, maybe it is. But one of the things that I heard somebody say, somebody who's smarter about hockey than me, say during the playoffs was, there's no point in the Leafs trying to do that at this stage because that's not how they got here. That's not their game. And if they need to start to do that in the playoffs, they ain't going to win because that's not how they play hockey. And I think, despite the fact that they didn't win, I do think that's how they will win. I do. I think they are a highly skilled team. And I think Tampa is actually quite similar. I think there were certainly patches of play where I would say the Leafs were every bit as physical as Tampa in the corners sometimes. I mean, Austin Matthews, for example, he was very physical in the corners. But they don't play like Boston. They don't play like some of the other teams, which are much more physical. But I would say that, you know, I look around to see the Oilers and Tampa and some of those teams who, to me, play a very similar brand of hockey to Toronto.
So Kyle Dubas is the general manager, and he designed the team under the direction of Brendan Shanahan as a highly skilled, fast team. And it didn't work. I mean, it worked to a certain extent, but teams realized they could knock the guys around on the team, that Toronto didn't like to be hit. So he addressed it, or the team addressed it, by adding some players to the lineup. Wayne Simmons, for example, and Kyle, and I've forgotten his name, darn it.
Yep.
Sorry?
Clifford?
Yeah, sorry, yes. Kyle Clifford. I was just trying to come up with it. And sadly, you know, they were inserted into the lineup, and Clifford was suspended for a game for a late hit, boarding hit. Simmons took a couple of penalties at improper times or inopportune times, and Tampa scored against the Leafs at that point. So they pulled them back, but it didn't mean they were soft by any means, because they still had Lyubushkin on defense, for example, Giordano on defense, strong defensive defensemen who have a tougher side as well. So they've toughened the roster, maybe not as much as many teams, but they still are a fast and skilled team with an element of I don't know, I wouldn't say fierceness by any means, but of toughness, I guess. And they try and play what's called team tough, meaning just that they aren't going to fight you, but they aren't going to back away from a body check, from a play or whatever. So there are some guys who are better. I mean, Austin Matthews stepped up as one of the better players on the team, and he had the most hits during several of the games during these playoffs, and really commanded a space on the ice. Mitch Marner, who's, what is he, 170 pounds, maybe if he's even that, did the same sort of thing. Candidly, William Nylander, who's a little bit of a huskier guy, but at the same point, he's much more of a fly-by guy. He'll try and stick the stick in rather than put his body in the way as well. So there are guys who are much more adept at the toughness, others who shy away from it. But all in all, it's a skill, speed team. And I think, as Tim said, that's the way they're going to live or die. And hopefully they'll take that to a championship in the next year or two or three.
Yeah, hopefully that won't kill them off altogether. Ian, what about you? You're not a Leaf fan. You're watching, I would say, just passionately, but perhaps even scornfully. That might be unkind. But what do you think?
Well, I think I'm likely to get struck by lightning by this next comment, because, you know, as I've been thinking about this subject, I mean, one of the dominant teams for the last, 15 years or more has been Boston, and they've built that way. They've got Brad Marchand, who's a pain in the goddamn what, but he's a scorer, and he gets he's feisty. They've got Chara back on defense, who's a big brute and can wipe out anybody. So that's what Boston built their success on for years, and they were continually finishing in the top of their, or near the top of their division for years. I think back to Montreal in their glory years. They had Robinson, it's just Savard and Lapointe on the defense, three big, hard checking defensemen, allowed them to take out the forwards on the other team. So I think Toronto's a good team to watch. As I think all of you know, I've been watching their games this last series because Habs are out and you guys are all watching. It gives us something to talk about. I'm not a total ignoramus as I usually am. But that was the one thing I did notice, is that there wasn't the checking that I think really is an integral part to take a team all the way to the cup. You need to have, I don't know how much, but enough that it's going to disrupt the other team. To have one or two guys that can do it, you need more than that, I think.
Well,
That's my sense.
I think you've put your finger on it with regards to all the players that you mentioned. They're all multidimensional. And I feel like the Leafs were not, like you guys said, you've got a defensive specialist, you've got a scoring specialist, whatever. You don't have somebody who is going to clog up the middle and start the rush. Somebody who is going to stand. Look at one of the things. I'm going to just jump back here. I kept seeing the Leafs desperately trying to score and not being able to get the puck in front of the net because Tampa had two guys, on each of, or had guy on each of four corners and a guy in the middle.
I'm just going to step back, and I'm going to sound very defensive as I'm a big Leaf fan, and please excuse me, but I think that there's a bit of an unfair rap here. So the first line, just as an example, and I don't want to go through the whole roster, but the first line, Matthews and Marner, extraordinarily skilled, but they also have Bunting on the line to create that room, to get into the corners, to stand in front of the net and take those pucks off his behind or whatever it takes as well. And he ended up scoring, what was it, 28 goals or something this year, and he's up for Rookie of the Year. He's really helped that line. Last year was Hyman who did the same thing. They replaced him with Bunting for all intents and purposes. So they do have that element for sure. The second line, similarly, although it's changed members as the season has gone along. So they've tried to construct it with skill and with some toughness too. The third line, I would dare say, is a defensive line for all intents and purposes. They're the first ones out for the penalty kill. They really are set for that almost specific purpose, but hoping that they can add some offense as well. And then the fourth line is what we call an energy line. And I mentioned a couple of players' names, Clifford and Simmons, but Jason Spezza quite often is there too. So they play less than 10 minutes per game, but they're out there to create a little bit of havoc, to try and throw the other team off a little bit too. So the team has been evolving over the last couple of years, and I'm quite pleased with the way they play tough along. They're definitely a skill and speed team, but they do have the tough element on every one of the lines that's out there, and a good back line now with defense who can also play that way too. So they're never going to be the Boston Bruins that way, or certainly the Philadelphia Flyers of the 1970s by any means, but there's a really nice mix that got them this far, and we'll see how it goes as time goes on. They'll have to tinker with the lineup. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, as we talk around this, I think that Kevin and I, as fans of the team, probably see all the strengths and the things we like about it. And the other two of you, interestingly, see some weaknesses, which I think is good, and it's a good counterpoint.
Yeah.
What's going to be interesting really is, have they got it right? Have they got it right? Can they win? Can they go all the way with primarily skill and speed and enough toughness just to get enough time on the puck and those kinds of things? Or have they got it wrong? I mean, the interesting thing, I think, in all sports, right? And Steve, it's certainly true in basketball, is that if there was a formula, it would be easy, right? It'd be easy, because then every coach and every general manager would go, well, here's how you build a winning team, and they build a winning team and they'd win. And it doesn't really work like that. So it's really interesting to see how it goes.
So let's switch this up. Now that the Leafs are out, the Raptors are out. I think we all go through this every year with all of the sports that we follow. unfortunately, because only one team can win and is rarely the team we're rooting for. How do you decide who to root for once your team is out? I'm a big basketball fan, and I've been watching all of the basketball games that have been going on since the Raptors have left, and I've formed my own opinions about teams from time to time. And the reason I wanted to bring this up, because an experience that I had last week when I was watching Milwaukee and Boston play, and in the last 2 minutes, I kept bouncing back and forth between one team and another, thinking to myself, "Oh, this would make a great storyline. This is going to make a great storyline. Oh, this now the game is really getting close. Oh, this is going to be a really great play. Oh my God, I can't believe that guy did that." So, what do you guys think? How do you go about deciding who you're going to root for once your favorite team is out?
So I gravitate to Canadian teams. When Toronto's out, I gravitate to Canadian teams to begin with. Very much a nationalist in that way. And on we go. Now, Calgary's playing Edmonton in the second round of the playoffs. It's a dilemma right then and there. But what I also find is that I watch, like all of you, kind of graze and watch a lot of games, and some from each of the different series. And I just find that I naturally, and it's happened all my life, and if I'm watching other sports as well, but I naturally find a team that I'm cheering for whatever reason, a favorite player, they're an underdog, and they're playing out over their heads, whatever it happens to be. So I find that my choices for other series that don't have a Canadian team involved go to a player I like, or I'll start off thinking that, geez, maybe even the Tampa Florida series that's going on, two against each other in the state of Florida. Right away, I'm thinking, well, Tampa just beat Toronto out, so I don't really like them that much. So maybe I'll cheer for Florida. They finished first in the league, but I'll watch it, and I think that I'll find that as we go along, that I probably will change my choice as the series goes. So Canadian teams first for me, favorite players and/or teams that I find as we move along. It's pretty objective, candidly.
When it comes to me, I watch the Canadians, and that's generally all I watch. And this is the first year that I've ever really paid close attention to a series that Montreal wasn't in. That was this recent Toronto series, because you guys are Toronto fans, and we're going to be talking about it. But normally, once Habs are out of the playoffs, I move on. When it comes to the CFL, though, I watch most of the games during the season. I watch the playoff games for sure, and I watch the final. Am I cheering for any one team? If the Alouettes are out, I really don't care. I just enjoy watching the game for a reason I can't explain. I just like watching the CFL. I find it a more interesting game of football than the NFL, which I know is way more popular. But yeah, so I just watch it because it's, I enjoy watching the game and enjoy watching the teams. I don't take sides in any game, even like I said, when it comes to the Grey Cup or something like that. Go ahead, Kev.
Let me just ask you, Ian. So I know that there's been a long time rivalry, Toronto against Montreal. Would you not cheer for Toronto because of your built-in favoritism for the Montreal Canadiens, or not necessarily?
I hold nothing against the Leafs.
Yeah.
I hold nothing against you and Tim being Leafs fans, or any other Leaf fans, or for Andrew, he's a Leafs fan. No, I mean, it's just, there's that natural rivalry there that goes on. But, who do I dislike? I hate the Bruins. I have hated the Bruins
Yeah.
as long as I can remember. I mean, the joke was, the joke is, I've got upstairs in Andrew's room is a picture with me and Bobby Orr and the Stanley Cup in between us. And I took great joy in telling him the Canadiens' name's on there way more than the Bruins is. And this is that click with the camera. It was fantastic. But yeah,
I see it so often on social media and hear it from people. I'll talk from the Toronto fans' perspective that anybody but the Canadiens. My favorite team is any team that beats the Canadiens. And I guess every team has got their rival or whatever. And I guess that's why I asked that, just to see if there was that kind of venom. You say you watch the Canadiens. after the Canadians are out, if that's the case, do you not watch hockey at all at that point, or?
I shut it off.
Really?
Like I said,
Okay.
this is the first time I ever recollect, other than I might have watched some of the Oilers back in their glory days, because they were a heck of a team to watch,
Oh, God, yes.
with Coffey and Gretzky and Grant Fuhr and those guys. But yeah, I'd say for the last few decades, if Montreal isn't in the playoffs, if they get knocked out, as soon as that happens, I move on to something else. The other thing is,
Gotcha.
like I say, I watch so much soccer available and stuff like that. But yeah, it's one of those things.
Yeah,
Well,
I think for me, it's, and I'm a bit like all of this actually, you know, because it kind of depends. I think that this with hockey, because I'm so passionate about the Leafs, and I'm a little bit like you, Ian, that once the Leafs are out, my interest kind of, you know, drifts away from hockey a little bit. But even if it doesn't, I think it's, and this is probably true of other sports too, where I'm not necessarily quite such a passionate fan of a particular team or player or something. But it's about people and stories after that, you know. So if there's a great story around somebody or, you know, the team for some reason, you know, for a long time my go-to second team was Vancouver, partly because of the Sedin twins, because I thought they were ridiculously good to watch play, and I liked the whole story about them. And Vancouver was a Canadian team, so it had a whole lot going for it. Of course, they're not in the playoffs, so I can't support them. I don't really care for the Oilers or the Flames too much. I like Edmonton as a place, and don't mind Calgary, but there's no real stories there. You know, there's Connor McDavid, who I think is again, you know, astonishingly good, but they don't excite me because they're not the Leafs. So I kind of, you know, I sort of drift away from the Oilers a little bit on that. So it tends to be about stories and people. But like you, Kevin, I find if I watch other sports, if I casually watch a soccer game, or I'm casually watching, you know, some long series of athletics or something like that, or a tennis match, I find it very hard not to start rooting for one side or the other, really. I don't know what it is. It's almost like an emotional weird thing that, you know, I feel like I have to root for somebody, you know. And in the Penguins the Rangers series, I ought to be supporting New York Rangers because I got a bunch of fans in New York. I like New York as a city. I've been to the Madison Square Garden a lot, but I couldn't help rooting for the Penguins just because with Sid and Gino and that group, and you kind of think maybe this is their last go, you know, and I couldn't help but, you know, want them to win. I kind of went into it thinking, oh, you know, the Rangers should win this. It'll be great. You know, I'll support them. I've got great friends who are Rangers fans. And by the end of the first game I watched, I was cheering for the Penguins. I couldn't help it. You know, it's sort of irrational, really, irrational and emotional. I don't know how it comes. It certainly isn't something I calculate and I look and go, well, you know, if there's these 4 teams left, or these 8 teams left, or these 2 teams left, well, I should support this one because these are the 3 reasons or 4 reasons for it. It's not like that, I don't think. I'm not sure it's like that for anybody, but it's definitely not like that for me.
It's
Yeah,
reality. It's reality TV, and you know, I think that's the thing. You know, the word emotional is exactly what it is. Like we suddenly get pulled into some sort of storyline. We might even make the storyline up in our own heads, but oftentimes it's either there's a team that's an underdog and you want to root for the underdog, or there's a team that's getting. I mean, again, well, I guess it's in any sport where it's in any sport where if a team is getting behind and they're getting too far behind, you hope that they catch up before they get to a place where they can't catch up, because once they can't catch up, then there's nothing interesting to watch and it's over. But well, that's it, folks. That's episode 5 of the new Athletic Supporters. Hopefully, Kim will join us next week if he can get himself off the mound. If you've made it this far this week, give yourself a chocolate shake sticker in your book. And thanks for listening or watching. And please tell your friends all about us. And if you're so inclined, please rate and review and share these episodes. And now you two are an athletic supporter.